Hey everybody, you're back for another action-packed, fun-filled episode of the Hopwood Buzz, and we're getting ready to start right about now. Okay everybody, we're back. The Hopwood Buzz is on track to, I think we're going to go over 1,700 subscribers this month. I mean, we're really doing good. I think we're viral. My wife doesn't think we are, but so here,
we'll see if this video can help.
So today, our episode is about not woodworking, not bee, not honey making or beekeeping or anything like that. It's about making sourdough bread. And Mrs. Hopwood is our guest today. She's joined the talent of the Hopwood Buzz channel, and she wants to show everyone how she makes sourdough bread along with her recipe, which we'll have below in the comments right next to the like button over there. So make sure you like, subscribe, and help out the channel. So the lovely and talented Mrs. Hopwood is going to take over right now.
I began to make sourdough well before all the COVID people, about 6 or 8 years ago, because my family likes bread and I wanted to perfect sourdough so that we could have that at home. So I did my research and through a couple trial and errors found the perfect sourdough bread. It's super easy. It's a no-knead recipe. It just takes some steps, and people are intimidated by steps, but the steps are really easy. So I've had friends and family ask me for starter, and I always give them the starter and the recipe, but most of them don't make it because it seems intimidating. So we've decided that we should just make a little video highlighting all the steps of making the sourdough bread so that you can make it at home.
All right, well, let's get started, okay?
All right.
Stay tuned, everybody.
This sourdough bread recipe is a no-knead sourdough. It just takes a few steps, and those steps take a little bit of time. So the first step is to take your starter out of the fridge, and generally you will discard about half of the starter. I don't measure, I just approximate about half. Most of the time I just throw the discard in the garbage. This time I'm going to take the discard and make another starter for a friend who has asked for it. So I put about half of that starter in there. And so what you do first is feed your starter. This is a half cup of water. It's filtered water. I always use filtered water. I have a reverse osmosis system. I've never not used filtered water because the original recipe called for filtered water due to chlorine content in some water that would kill the good bacteria and yeast. So I always use filtered water. Half cup of filtered water, a cup of bread flour. I always use bread flour as well. This is a 25-pound bag. I buy it at Sam's Club. I have purchased probably about 1,000 pounds of flour in the last, 6 or 8 years that I've been making sourdough. So you just stir the water, the flour, and the original starter together until it's mixed. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, just completely mixed together. By the way, I always use the exact same spatula as well. I don't use this for any other cooking because if you use it for other cooking, it might retain the oils and greases from other things. So I use the exact same spatula. You also should not ever use metal. You should only use silicone or wood utensils and only glass or plastic for your starter. So that's it. I put the lid on, I leave it at room temperature. I let it sit until it doubles in bulk, and then we'll go to the next step where we make the sponge. So the starter has been fed and it has risen to the top. Depending on how cold the starter is when you first start, it may take a while. This actually, I let it rise overnight. Next step, we take our clean spatula, tap down the starter, and we're gonna make the sponge. So you take half the starter, dump that right into your bucket, and then 1 cup of water, 2 cups of bread flour. And these measurements are somewhat accurate. At the same time, this is an art just as much as a science. So this is your sponge. You just stir this together until it's mixed. Again, doesn't have to be fancy, just completely mixed together. It might be a little dry, it might be a little wet, depending on the humidity where you are. So the sponge just gets covered with its lid and we let that rise. But we do have to feed the rest of the starter. So we have to put back 1/2 cup of water and 1 cup of flour. So we can continually feed this starter, and then once it rises again, you can continually keep making loaves of bread. So you'd make another sponge out of this once it rises again, and then keep feeding it. So now my starter is fed. It will grow. Again, it was just 1/2 cup of water and 1 cup of bread flour, and then it will rise back up. If I wasn't going to use this again, I would let it rise up and then just put it in the fridge until the next time I use it, and start the process over where I do half of it discarded and then feed it before I make my sponge. So once the sponge is made, and I have one here that was made earlier, it would have looked just like this, and now it's doubled in size. Now I can make my actual dough. So to the sponge, I add 3 cups of water, 5 teaspoons of salt, I always use kosher salt. I mix that together, and again, this is going to be a little bit of a wet dough, so it's harder to shape. If you want it to be a little bit more of a dry dough, you're going to have to use more flour at some point. So I mix this together, and then in goes 6 cups of bread flour. And I just mix this all together, and it will get difficult for a second. And then you will put the lid on this and let this rise. So this should double in bulk as well. Once this is doubled in bulk at room temperature, then it goes in the fridge for at least 8 hours before you can bake it. So I will mix this up, put the lid on this, let it rise, and then put it in the fridge. The bread dough has been in the refrigerator overnight, and what that does is it allows the dough to become sour. The starter, of course, is a little bit sour, but that really allows the flavor to produce the very sour taste. So the next step is just to put the dough in our pans. I spray my pans with a little nonstick spray. This recipe will make 2 loaves. And again, this is a very wet dough, and that's the reason that it's no knead, because it's wet, and so there's no need to knead the dough. This would be the point where if you wanted a more supple dough, you would add flour and you would actually knead the dough. And that is in case you might want to slash the dough later. But there's no reason that you have to. So we scrape the dough down from the bucket. Kind of knead it out of there a little bit. I do give it a little quick knead, but that's it. Kind of just approximate half the dough. And then I just turn it into a loaf, and it's sticky, but that's okay. And it's not a perfect loaf, but it will rise perfectly. You could also make rolls at this point if you so desire. Those aren't quite 100% half, but that doesn't matter. So these will just sit at room temperature to rise, and then we'll be back to show you the baking process. Both loaves have risen just to the rim of the pan. So the next step for me is I always like to stencil my bread. It adds a little special something, and people think it's really fancy, but it's not. So you just take any old stencil. I have a Christmas tree because it's Christmas time, and I make this for a lot of friends and family and neighbors at Christmas. So I'll just stencil a little tree by shaking just a little bit of flour over the top. And my husband and I are beekeepers, so I often use my bee stencil as well. A nice loaf of sourdough bread and a little honey makes a lovely gift. So we just shake that flour right over the top, lift the stencil, and voila. These will go into a 450-degree oven for 40-ish minutes, but I always take the temperature. It should be between 180 and 200, and I'll show you that as we move along. But they'll go into a 450-degree oven, and we'll get some oven springs, so these will lift a little bit because the temperature is so hot. I want to take this opportunity to let you know that if you like what you see in this video, you can like and subscribe and comment down below to the Hopwood Buzz channel.
These go right in the top rack real quick because I don't want any heat to get out of the oven. And then we'll just watch them and take their temperature in a little bit. So it's been about 40-ish minutes. So we are going to check the temperature. They're looking good. And I just use a little thermometer here. And it should be between 180 and 200 internal temperature. Looks like we are going to make it to that. Yep, right at 180. So I'm going to go ahead and take both of these out. I'll leave them right here for just a couple of minutes till they cool just enough that I can handle them to take them out of the pan and put them on the rack. So these are still pretty hot. They've just come out of the oven about 5 minutes ago, but I do like to get them out of the pan as soon as possible, as soon as I'm able to at least touch the bread, because otherwise they start to sweat and then you risk your bread actually getting soggy in the pan. And my countertops are heat proof, so that's why I went ahead and just set those on there. But I do set them on a cooling rack just again so they don't get soggy. And for my kids, there is nothing better than a hot heel of sourdough bread. So see that steam? When it's fresh from the oven, I like to get them a fresh heel of bread with real butter, because there's nothing else in the world better than hot sourdough bread and real butter and Hopwood Buzz honey. I hope you enjoy. I hope you make this at home, and I hope you have many memories with your family. Giant bite. That is so good. That is so good. This is Amber Hopwood for the Hopwood Buzz. Please like, subscribe, and enjoy your bread.